I am Sage Rountree. We are in the Comfort Zone conversation space at Comfort Zone Yoga, my virtual studio focused on yoga teacher development. And today we are going to talk about how to theme your yoga class without overthinking it. Overthinking is something I hear a whole lot from y'all who are in Comfort Zone. It's a community of now over 2,300 yoga teachers who show up to support each other. And we meet on these live calls as well, which sometimes I think of as a live version of my podcast, Yoga Teacher Confidential. So when you show up to your class, often you come in having spent hours planning your class, maybe hours theming your class, and then you find yourself in front of the room, maybe with the lights on you, with a set of several sets of eyes looking at you, and it all kind of goes out the window. So the simpler the approach, the easier it is for you to remember to fall back on it when your class comes. So over the course of the next hour or so, I will talk about what a theme is, why a theme matters, and a very simple way that you can think about theming your class so that you can have it be your default. So it's something you can fall back to as you get going in front of the real live students in the room. A lot of what we're covering today is explained in great detail in these two beautiful books, Teaching Yoga Beyond the Poses and Teaching Yoga Beyond the Poses Volume 2, which is the second volume that came out last year. Together, they offer you 108, our magical yoga number, 108 pre-populated themes for your yoga classes. And Alexandra, my co-author on the book, and I don't expect you to read them verbatim, although you are welcome to. We want you to take inspiration from these and adapt them in a way that makes sense for your own unique student population. Maybe your students, like mine, are athletes and they don't really want to hear the Sanskrit words, but they are open to philosophy, to psychology, to tips from yoga beyond the poses that would help them perform better in their sport. So you will find some very practical themes in here. You will find some very philosophical themes in here. And as you keep going with your reading of my canon, you will be excited to hear, I hope, that there is a new book called Yoga Off the Mat, Alexander and I co-wrote. It is off at the printer and it will be out in your hands in July. You can pre-order it now wherever books are sold. Yoga Off the Mat is a general population book. It is, of course, for you as a yoga teacher, but it's also something that you might want to share with your student. It's a very modern and accessible take on yoga philosophy. So if you liked learning more about yoga philosophy in Teaching Yoga Beyond the Poses, and maybe you've tried to crack like George Feuerstein's book on yoga philosophy or like some of those very weighty yoga philosophy books, I think you're going to find this is a lot easier, a lot more accessible if you like the tone of Teaching Yoga Beyond the Poses. Yoga Off the Mat is going to be from you. Ciao, Sara. Great to have you here. I'm looking in the chat. Hi, Mara in Michigan. Congrats. Go Blue. Hopefully you are not a Michigan State fan. And hey, Lily and Libby, so great to see my neighbors from North Carolina here with me. Okay, I'm going to click us through a couple slides. These slides are mostly just to keep me on track today. We know where we are, when we are. And here is the problem that I already alluded to. When you think about theming your class, it gets really, really easy to get in your head. To even look at the template in Teaching Yoga Beyond the Poses, which is downloadable for you here at Comfort Zone Yoga, and then think, oh, that's a lot of words I got to write. The template that we offer you in that book asks you to think of a theme, to write a little bit about your theme to make it big, to distill your theme down to a word or a phrase or a single sentence to make it small, to think about ways that you could support your theme with quotes or chanting or a poem or maybe songs that could go on your class playlist, and then to think about ways that you could put your words and your theme into the opening, the movement, the stillness, and the closing of your class. And that's what we're going to cover here today in our light, L-I-T-E version of this theming approach. But sometimes that feels a little overwhelming, right? You sit down to do it and you're like, that is a whole lot to think through. And this is a problem that I see with you, my dear colleagues, all the time when folks come into Comfort Zone and I check in with them and say, hey, what's on your mind as a teacher? And folks think like, oh, I get in front of the classroom and I just kind of freeze up. What I think is the root of this is our deep love for, gratitude to, and care for the practice. Yoga has changed our lives. That's what made us want to become yoga teachers. But Because it is so weighty and so important to us, it feels like something that we need to pay utmost respect to. And it becomes this almost onerous, heavy thing to carry into the classroom. And we wind up just skipping theming entirely or getting frozen when we sit down to do our sequencing because we care so much. I'm not asking you to care less about yoga, but I am asking you to stop thinking about exactly what yoga means to you and start thinking about, how can I serve my students? These people who are on their mats in front of me, who took an hour out of their week, an hour out of their day, maybe to drive, to practice with me. How can I give them something of value without needing to fire hose them with everything wonderful about yoga all over the course of one class? So it doesn't need to be a big idea with a capital B and a capital I. And when we think of it like that, we are putting such an onus on ourselves, such a heavy workload on ourselves. It feels like a really high lift, a really scary lift. So it's easier just kind of to skip it sometimes. But I want to present to you today a way that you can think about theming your class that will immediately land with your students and not be such a heavy lift for you. So the low lift way to think about theming your yoga class is to think about a theme as a thread. And I can't help myself. You may know I have a PhD in English literature, so I always have to throw in a little bit. We've got a little bit of mythology in here. We've got a little bit of philosophy in here. You might remember that Yoga Sutra, the word sutra actually means thread. And what we're doing as we read the sutras is almost weaving a thread like you would if you've ever made a mala. It's a fantastic mindfulness activity. When I led in-person yoga teacher training, we did it every time, and it was very interesting for self-knowledge. People would get frustrated. Some people were really good at it. Some folks hated it. Some folks loved it. When you're when you're creating a mala, you're taking your thread and you're sliding every bead onto it, tying a knot, and moving on to the next one. And that's how you wind up with this beautiful strand of beads. That is your meditation mala, similar to a rosary if you're not familiar with mala. It's a way that you can track your repetitions when you're chanting. So sutra means the thread that goes through each of the beads, and each of the aphorisms in the Yoga Sutras counts as one of the beads, and the sutras themselves are this thread that weaves through this explanation of the practice of yoga, the reason for doing yoga, and where yoga can take you in your life, into liberation and connection. And if you keep reading the sutras, into astral projection and all kinds of exciting siddhis, superpowers that the Yoga Sutras get into in the latter books. If you're familiar with Greek mythology, you know the legend of the Minotaur, the bull-like creature who lived in the labyrinth. And Ariadne is our heroine in this story, and she gives Theseus, the hero, a thread, a long thread. And that's how Theseus is able to go through the labyrinth to slay the Minotaur and then make his way back out, because he has this thread that carried him through. So when we think of theming as a thread, we've got both of those images in mind. And if you want a simpler image, since we're going simple today, it's the cutest little sight when you're in a city to go out on the street and see the preschoolers or the elementary school-aged children walking along with their hands on a rope. That string is another way that we can keep everybody together in a line, everybody together as a unit. And if we think of it that way, just to loop this back to yoga philosophy, we know that the word yoga means union, from yug. It is the yoke, Y-O-K-E, that goes around the necks of two oxen. And that is also a way to join things together, to unite things together. A thread is doing the exact same thing. So in this JV version of theming, in this light version of theming, we're looking for a thin thread. I'm going to show you how it can be even just a word, and how you're going to pick it up at the beginning of class. You're going to weave it through a cue or two in movement, a cue or two in stillness, and then you're going to tie it off in a sweet little bow in closing. Maybe you have only 4 touch points over the course of your class. I think you need to have at least 4, let's call 4 the bare minimum, because otherwise your theme is just DOA. Like it failed to launch. You've probably been in a class where the yoga teacher gives this long Dharma talk, or maybe a rambling story about their life at the beginning of class, and then It never gets called back. It never comes back around again over the course of class. That's not what we're looking for here. We are looking for a really wonderfully written experience. Like I'm thinking about stand-up comedy, how like a really well-done comedy special is going to keep referring back to a particular idea or theme over and over and over again. It's not just a throwaway joke at the beginning that then never comes back. It is something that you see over and over, and then it ends in kind of this mic drop moment at the end. So that's the whole structure that we're looking for. It does not need to be a fancy golden super woven like chain. It is just a simple thread that runs through the course of your class. Here's why it matters that you theme your class, because your students are coming to yoga, whether or not they know it on their very first experience, but definitely after the first one where they get something beyond just the physical movement, they are coming for that elevated experience. Your theme, your messaging is where you take yoga make it into a real experience for your students to find connection. Otherwise, it could just be some mindful movement. What makes it yoga is this pointing that we do toward the broader philosophy, toward the potential for liberation and freedom, for moksha, for kalvaya, for moving beyond just what we're doing with our bodies and our breaths on the mat. And a theme well done in this thread model is a story. And we as humans are wired for stories. We're always looking for stories. That's what we're going to remember. So often I mention somebody to my husband and I give him like a throwaway line about him. Like at one point I was looking for someone to help me with a little bit of brand design or something on a website. And I wound up finding a woman through a blog that she had written about design, like color design on a website. And I went and looked at her site and I was like, oh, look at this. Her husband is an architect, or she had gone to architecture school and she has a toddler. And from that point on, my husband always remembered Samantha. Her husband is an architect. She has a toddler. And it's funny, like that's what sticks. It's these personal elements. And let this be a reassurance to you that your yoga class does not need to be all up here, all high philosophy, all very heady stuff and general stuff. Your students are going to resonate with your class and with your theme when you also make it specific and personal. This is not an invitation to overshare, to indulge in TMI, to make your yoga class about you. But it is an invitation for you to show a little bit of your personality, to show a little bit of your personal life in clean, easy ways that will help your students relate to you and see how these ideas are not just up here in the ether, but can really, really ground in their own bodies. Here's the thing that nobody is going to tell you, but here, I'm going to tell you right now. Having a theme, having this thread for your class will make your class easier because it gives you something to hold on to. Even if you're the preschool teacher at the front of the rope line, you're still holding on. And when you are tempted to run your mouth off, when you are tempted to talk too much, to over cue, to overstimulate your students, your theme gives you something to come back to. You come back to it, you say something about it, doesn't even need to be super wise. And then you can just step down, step back, and let your students drop into their own experience. So the theme is a gift not only for your students, but also for you as a teacher. And y'all, it just doesn't have to be that deep. Your theme might be something deep, like you'll see in the Teaching Yoga Beyond the Poses books, but it could also be a word like patience is an example we'll see here in these slides. And when we get to the latter part of this workshop, I hope we can come up with a few themes together, kind of like we're doing improv comedy. I'll have you drop some words and we can see together what might we say about this in ways that would be useful for the students. Softening is a theme. The exhale is just a lovely theme. What you already know is a theme, and enough is a really good theme. So the bar is way lower than you think in what you could be doing as a theme in your yoga class. It just doesn't have to be that deep, y'all. Here are 3 simple methods so that when you sit down to theme, you're not looking at our template from Teaching Yoga Beyond the Poses or looking at a blank page in your teaching notebook, journal, a blank page on your computer screen, but that you have some touch points. One is simple observation. So as you get centered and think about how do I want the class to go? What experience do I want my students to have? You can take a reflection moment. Think what's been showing up in your life. Look at there in that beautiful, beautiful spring here. So we've got green leaves. I'm in central North Carolina. It got so green over the course of the last week. It's super lush and beautiful and also extremely polleny. But there is your theme for a class is like the sense of a bud, of something opening, of potential, of growth. Heck, that's a full month of themes right there. And we could tie this creation and this potential and this bud back to yoga philosophy. We could tie it into like the Hindu mythology, where there's a cycle that has three parts. There's Brahma, the creator, there is Vishnu, the sustainer, and then there is Shiva, the destroyer. And everything has a beginning and a middle and an end. So we're here at the beginning out there in the beautiful North Carolina spring, and that would be a great theme for your class. And that's something that you can observe even on the way into the yoga studio, although I do suggest you give your theme a little bit more thought than the last few minutes before class, but something you see that's turning up in your life. One time years ago, probably almost 20 years ago, because we were living a little bit farther from my studio at that point, I remember I went in to teach my yoga class on a Monday night, and I was driving on the 4-lane highway, and I came on a bunch of cars that were stopped, and a couple people were outside of their cars looking at something that was happening on the road. I was afraid. I thought maybe an animal had been hit or hurt, and there was an animal involved, and it wasn't hit or hurt, but it was a freaking out bunny, a pretty big bunny, rabbit that was running in these circles, just having an absolute meltdown, probably because all these people were around it. But somebody had noticed the bunny was trying to cross the road and they tried to chase it back. And it wound up just kind of in the circle of folks having this complete spiral, this complete crash out. And I remember they eventually ushered the bunny out of the road. Everybody got back in their cars. And on the way into class, I was reflecting, this is the observation method of choosing a theme, on how sometimes we get into that freak out mode. It's the freeze of the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And we just start running in these circles, and this is almost creating our own suffering in ways that if we just step back, calm down, stop running in circles, we could get bigger perspective. So that was my theme in class tonight. And I literally told the story like on the way to the studio. I saw this experience with these bunnies, the people and the bunny was okay. So that would be an example of using observation. Another way that you can really quickly come up with a theme is to ask a question. And this can be a question that then becomes a word that you use as your thread through class, or this can be a question that you wind up asking your students in class, because teaching yoga is a conversation. It's a conversation that you're having with your students. The trick, though, is that teaching yoga is a conversation in which you, as the leader, only get to hear one side. So it starts to feel like a monologue, which it feels like to me when I'm just talking right here to the camera and I can't see y'all, but I know that you're there. I need to remember to give you time to think through your own experience, to process, and to fill in your own answers. You know, having been a student in yoga class for years, that when your teacher asks a question, you almost always are answering it internally, right? Either with your thinking, sometimes with your body. If your teacher says, where could you soften? Maybe you're answering it with a physical movement of settling down into your forward fold a little bit more. Or how could you find some balance here? Maybe you get a little bit steadier in your single leg standing balance. That is the conversation that I'm talking about. So a great way that you can bring questions in is to start with the question and maybe even carry your question in as your theme. Since apparently I am in storytelling mode and I said people like stories, one of the best questions that I ever unintentionally had answered in a yoga class happened maybe about 10 years ago. I was teaching yoga to the Carolina men's basketball team, so college age basketball players. And we had a big guy, Kennedy Meeks. He was quite large. He was 6'9" and slightly beefy and just like a doll baby. He had the chubby cheeks and a sweet face, and Coach Williams called him big baby. And once I was in there and I was teaching them, and I had them lying down on their backs, centering, was leading some breath awareness at the beginning of class. And I said, now notice, where do you feel your breath? Do you feel it moving underneath your collarbones? Do you feel your breath moving in your rib cage? Can you feel your breath moving in your belly? These are rhetorical questions that you often hear at the beginning of yoga class. And Kennedy lifted his head up and he looked at me. He said, I feel it in my belly. I fell out. I thought that was the funniest thing. And Marcus Page, who was one of his teammates, said, it is a rhetorical question. You do not have to answer it. But that is the conversation that we're having. And we need to give time and space for our students to supply their own answers to the question, like, where do you feel your breath moving? I feel it in my belly. And then the third quick pick method I have for you is just let Alexandra and me do it for you. Take a look at these or find some other inspiration from something that you've read or something that you've heard or something that you have experienced. By the way, just a very quick sidebar. I have a yoga class planning membership called the Yoga Class Prep Station. You'll hear me refer to it as the Prep Station. And one of the things that I offer as part of the membership is once a month, I give you a little theme seed. It's not even a full theme. It's just a little idea. So that's another example of borrowed wisdom. I'll make sure that I link that underneath the replay of this video, but you can come to comfortzoneyoga.com/prep to see that. Let's go a little bit deeper into each of these three methods. So before you sit down to write your theme light, you can take a minute to ask yourself, like, what is up? What have I been noticing lately? And then you can just write down a single word. There is no need to overthink this. You do not need to even write a full paragraph about it, like we invite you to in the theme template from Teaching Yoga Beyond the Poses. A simple word might be enough. Like inhale. That's the advice I would have given that bunny. Like, chill out, bunny. Or relax, or potential, or stillness near the December holidays would be a good one. It could be heat in the middle of the summer. It could be release as we get into the autumn. So any one of these words, an observation from nature, an observation from something that you have been noticing in your life, that's enough to be a good theme for you. And then you just take that one word and give it 4 touch points. For example, I said we could unpack patience a little bit. At the beginning of class, you could say something like you see on the slide here. Today, I invite you to explore patience, not the gritting your teeth kind of patience, but the kind of patience that really comes from trusting the process. You would drop that and then you would get quiet for a little bit, let your students supply their own answers to this invitation. Then at some point, when you are in a shape, you can pull the thread through that shape. Here is where patience lives, in the staying. And once you have felt patience in a hold, then maybe you'll bring it into a transition, into a movement. Let's see if you can carry this patience with you as we move toward the next shape. And even if we let this be a patient transition. So long holds and transitions are another way to think about it if you don't have much stillness in your class, where in the Teaching Yoga Beyond the Poses books, we say, think of something to say during movement and something to say during stillness. You could also think of it in terms of holds and transitions, especially if you teach yin class, which has so much stillness and not much movement. You could think of it as being in the shape, drop a little bit of a thread, put a little stitch in your thread, in the cloth of your class right there with your piece of thread as you go through the yin hold. And then when you're doing the rebound pose or the transition pose or the shakeout pose, you could bring it in again. Finally, we always want to make sure that we tie this up in a bow. So come back to remind people what they did. The paradigm for a presentation is to tell people what you're going to tell them, and then tell them, and then tell them what you told them. The exact same holds true for your yoga class. You want to keep telling them because they don't hear everything you say. You hear everything you say. In fact, that's part of, I think, how we get ourselves in our heads as yoga teachers is that we try to make it interesting for ourselves. Our students don't really hear everything you say. You can say it over and over and over again, and maybe a third, if you're lucky, of what you're saying is actually going to land with them. Another approach is this questioning approach, a little bit of inquiry, where you start with a question instead of a word. And think for yourself, like, what is something that your students are grappling with right now? What would you love for them to explore? What's something that you have witnessed in your classroom over the last few weeks that might be worth unpacking as a theme or delivering as a one-word theme? Then this question itself could become the thread that you return to throughout class. And it lets them have their own experience and supply their own answers, which can be even more powerful to them than you offering up the answers for them. They get to arrive at their own conclusions. And that is a really powerful and beautiful thing that you can offer your students. Another idea is to draw on borrowed wisdom on something that you find in the books. As I said, they have 108 ready-made themes. And these themes are almost recipes. You know me, I love my food analogies. And once you understand the recipe, once you have borrowed these themes, you will start to learn the deep structures, understand the syntax, understand how the ingredients go together, adjust the flame, the cooking time, the time in the oven, whatever metaphor you want to use here, and then you can start cooking on your own. You'll also get a sense, if you're lucky, of how these themes land with your students, of what your students comment on, of what really seems to light them up, what gets you questions or comments after class, what gets you a little bit of a smile during class, or conversely, we are not trying to make our students cry, but sometimes you can tell that a theme is landing because they get a little bit emotional. Beautiful. We come to yoga to have that elevated experience and to really connect ourselves and the greater self. And your theme is definitely one wonderful way to do it. Here is another paradigm I like. It's a little bit like tell them what you told them, tell them, and or tell them what you're going to tell them what you tell them, and then tell them what you told them. This is the scripting recipe that I use when I draft my podcasts for y'all, Yoga Teacher Confidential. It's what, so what, and now what. So what is a statement of the idea, of the concept. It is your thesis statement. Then so what? Well, why does this matter? Why should I care about this? How does this affect me? How does this affect other people? How does this affect the world at large? How does this affect the universe at large? That's your so what. And then the now what is what are we going to do about it? What am I supposed to do with this information? What, so what, now what? It's a great reflective model to help you create any theme. So you're going to present your theme. You can make it both personal and universal. And that is as simple as saying, it's so beautiful out. I hope that y'all are coping okay with the pollen. If it's too tough to breathe through your nose tonight, it's okay to let your lips part. Some air can come through your mouth. But as we see with this crescents, with this growth and this greenness outside, there's a lot of potential that feels like it's getting ready to emerge. And I feel this in my own life in XYZ ways. And then universal, we see it out in nature as well. Then you could ask a question like, can you take a moment to reflect, where is this sense of possibility showing up for you in your life? And then you zip it and you give your students some time. Early in class, that's really useful way to ask them, so what? And that's also something that you can keep coming back to through the class. And toward the end, we'll tie up the thread with the now what. How is this going to play off in your life off the mat? So maybe once folks have gone into their final relaxation, you bring them back out, they come up to sitting. This is a great moment to tie that bow, to say, tonight we talked about possibility, and it's Monday. As we go into the rest of the week, I invite you to keep your eyes open for possibility and look how things are growing. Right now, we can see the leaves and the flowers literally growing day by day, but some other things grow more slowly. So see if you can stay attuned to that possibility and that growth. And that's a nice way to send them off. So it's what, so what, now what? 3 questions, all that help you with your arc. Let's build one or more themes together. So right now we're going to take a theme and map it through a full class arc. And I need you to help me with this. Let's be collaborative. Can you please put some words in the chat that describe, that might describe something you see outside your window, that might point to something that you have been reflecting on lately, that can you maybe ask a question, and we could do an inquisitive theme, an introspective theme, or is there some quote that you have absolutely loved seeing lately that you would like to bring to the table here? So I'm counting on y'all to put that in the chat, and I'm going to stop sharing for just a sec so I'm not tiny, and I'm going to hydrate. All right. I see people are typing. This is exciting. All right. Mara says she talked about anger. Whoa, that's a really good one. Yes. Yes. And being in a university town, you see anxious students approaching finals. Yeah, that certainly is the case in Chapel Hill as well. So I love what you have here in parentheses, Mara, around anger. So observation. So being able to like name the feeling as it is, with some uh, objectivity, getting curious, not angry. I love that as well. It's like starting to get more inquisitive about what is this feeling teaching me, and focusing on your intention. Like, what am I looking to achieve here? Fantastic. Anger is something that would make a fantastic theme to thread through. At the beginning of class, you could talk about all these things that you have in parentheses. And then when you're moving, I can think of several movement poses where people get angry. Plank pose, chair pose, a very particularly cute chaturanga can make people angry. And we can talk about that rajasic, like uplifting rise of energy that we sometimes interpret as anger. So that would be a place to put that in. And then we could talk about like what comes after anger. If anger is fire, then fire can burn down to ash. And in either transition or in a moment of stillness, you could talk about like what is the like what could cool this off? How can we let this fiery anger start to settle down, or this heat start to cool? And then what are we left with? And how does that feel? That would be a way to put a question in there. Then at the end of class, you could tie this up and say, like, anger is a way that we are able to spur ourselves to action. Sometimes we talk about that spur toward action as courage, meaning like having a lot of heart. And anger is what can fuel your courage to go and create the changes in the world that you want to see. So that would be a way to weave that fantastic theme through. Brigitte says unexpected change, right? Exactly. It's this question that we constantly come back to in yoga and in stira and sukha, in like what is in our control and what is out of our control. I always like to point to what we call kriya yoga. So it's the last three of the niyamas in the Yoga Sutras. Tapas, svadhyaya, ishvara, pranidhana. Tapas comes back almost to Mara's idea of anger, of like heat and rising and dedication and zeal. Fiery zeal is sometimes how we describe it. And then Ishvara Pranidhana is surrender to the Lord, surrender to God, surrender to the universe. And that's where we need to get to when we are faced with unexpected change, right? It's like often our reaction is to come into the tapas, to come into the anger and to try to control the things that we can. But we instead need often to just lean into the acceptance, lean into the surrender. And the fulcrum in between tapas and Ishvara Pranidhana is svadhyaya, self-study. And your yoga practice gives you an opportunity for self-study. So that would be a little spiel you could give at the beginning. Invite your students to think about this concept in their lives. Maybe to think about some time when they encountered a change that they were not expecting and how they had to revise their expectations and the way that they were moving through the world as a response. Then in each of the segments of your class, you could throw in an interesting transition and not go where people think you're going. So this could be as simple, y'all, as changing the breath cue for cat and cow. So inhale cat, exhale cow. People would be like, what's happening? But very quickly you can adapt. And that might be a fantastic lesson to give your students as well. In stillness or in transition, we can get this chance to reflect on what just happened in the movement part. And that gives us another chance to become comfortable with surrender, with controlling just what we can control. And then we wrap that back up at the end, maybe with something that folks could take out into the room so that they have a little bit more adaptability. Another word that we use for that in yoga is santosha, contentment or equanimity. Susan, this is a great one. Freedom from story. Stuck and want to expand, shift, going from constriction and small spaces to freedom and, sorry about that, freedom and expansion. So this is like a whole year of themes right here in these very few words, Susan. Fantastic. So the story that sticks us in yoga, we call samskara, the grooves, the ruts that we can get into. And that yoga is an opportunity to recognize where you're in these grooves or these ruts, and then to make decisions about whether you really want to continue in that groove, you want to stop digging the hole that you're in, maybe want to shift your habits. So that habits would be a great way, a great thread to pull out of this fantastic list. And then the sense of expansion, of constriction and expansion. So good. And this would play out in the movement part so clearly. Like you could even do arm movements, pulling in and expanding. This is the movement we call lila, divine play. It's got like a tightening and an expansion. Spanda is the word for the expansion part of that. And boy, I could think of all kinds of physical manifestations of this idea of going from constriction and small spaces to freedom and expansion. Again, that could be like a child's pose that you describe as almost like an acorn, and then it grows into a big tree. So those would be some examples to use there. Lily, I love it. Lengthening, like the lengthening of the daylight hours. So right there, we've already made it this universal experience that everybody is in. But where could you find more length? More length in your breath here is something you could say during centering. Where can you find more length in your spine or your hamstrings is something you could say during movement and stillness. And then where could you expand or lengthen? Where could you go a little slower as you move through the rest of your day or your week would be a great thing to say at the end. Do you all see how I'm clicking you through trying to click you through 4 stitches of the thread through the cloth of your class as you go? Haley, yes, spring cleaning. Such a great theme for your class. And you could do that over and over the course, say, of the month of April. Exhale is a great example of that, right? It's where we literally release what we don't need anymore. And we have to really release the exhale in order to make room for the new. That would be a fantastic way to cue breath awareness at the beginning of your class and set up this theme of clearing out old stuff, making space. I love that. And then a lot of the stuff that I suggested that Lily and Susan could say in their theme ideas would go there really well too. And now I see Mara saying, yes, sun salutations go well with anger too, like bringing heat, building tapas. Fantastic. Liddy, how to keep moving through illness, injury, and age. So longevity, I think that's fantastic. Alexandra and I wrote a book together called Lifelong Yoga, which was our first book together. And that's the theme of that book is, again, it comes back to the sense of controlling what you can control and paying attention to the things that you can control. That's tapas. That's where you can continue to work on your balance as a way to fall-proof yourself and make yourself more durable as you age. But that there's so many things that we have to accept and surrender to as we age. And these would be things that we could pull back into longevity. Erica's got a great one about leading with an open heart. Open heart would be a great theme to go through your whole class. So you can make that both metaphorical and also very practical. Often we talk about it in back bends, but you could lead with your heart in a forward fold. You could lead with your heart in a lunge with a little bit of a back bend, all kinds of ways that you could feed that through. And then I see Livy is talking about the vayus in her class, talking about upward and downward energy through breath and movement. So this would be prana vayu and apana vayu, the lifting energy and the lowering energy. And that's a fantastic thing to introduce in class because your students are feeling the vayus, whether or not they have ever articulated them. Especially prana and apana, the lifting and the lowering, is something that they're doing with their arms when they're doing a half sun salutation or a full sun salutation. Is something that they're feeling with their breath, but it's a way to articulate the energy in the body that I think can feel really intuitive because we can feel it with the inhale, and we can feel it with the exhale, and we can see it playing out in the course of a yoga class. So those are all fantastic, like one word theme ideas Hopefully, I modeled for you some ways that you could start to unpack them. If you have any others, feel free to drop them into the chat. And if you have any questions, we're about to move into a Q&A, and I am happy to see you put your questions in the little bubble that looks like a speech bubble with a question mark in it, and I can pull them up on screen. I'm going to pull my slides back in. All right. Some takeaways that I want you to have. Number one, it ain't that deep, y'all. It doesn't need to be that deep. You do not need to have a PhD. You do not need to do hours of research. In fact, if you do hours of research, you're going to be all in your head about your theme in ways that are not going to serve your students. I want you in your body about your theme, not up in your head. I want you in your heart about your theme, not up in your head. I know you are used to your favorite teacher getting up in front of the classroom, delivering a Dharma talk that just knocks your socks off. Maybe that's why you wanted to be a yoga teacher, right? But you do not need to hold yourself to that standard. You just need to express your truth in simple ways. And let me tell you, here's the magic. When you do that with your students front and center, when you do that with your students top of mind, they think of you as the same way you think of your teacher. They think of you as this brilliant leader. It doesn't need to be fancy. In fact, fancy can be off-putting. Fancy can be too much the ivory tower voice of the expert. Fancy can be confusing. Simple is going to win over fancy every time. You just need a word or a question, some thread that you stitch through at least those 4 places in your class. I'm thinking as I elaborate on this thread metaphor of like the initial, like, I don't know, there must be a term that tailors use for it where they just kind of like do this very loose, I guess it's tacking, right? Where they do this very loose tack. And that would be your 4 stitches. But what you will do with practice is find a finer stitch number so that things are really connected more firmly. They don't pull apart quite so easily over the course of your class. And that doesn't mean that you are talking every second of your class about your theme. It just means instead of 4, maybe you touch on it 8 times, or maybe you even take it up to 16 times, recognizing that your students, when you say something 16 times, might catch it 5 to 7 of those times. Your students just want to follow you like your preschool class would follow you if you were their teacher at the front of the rope. They just want to have something to hold on to. They want something to keep coming back to so that if they get lost, they know they can grab onto the rope. And that is how you are going to serve your students really well. That's how you're going to become almost everybody's favorite teacher, by having the vulnerability and the courage to share what you have learned in your yoga practice and to share some steps toward freedom and liberation that you have learned and that you have to offer to your students. All right, oops, I went back instead of forward. Here are some places that you can learn more. I put links to the books on Amazon, but they are available wherever books are sold, including if your library doesn't already have them. You can ask your library to order these books, and that means when you are done reading them, other people can benefit from it too. Alexandra and I get the same royalty no matter where you buy your book, and we also get it if you have your library buy it. So we are delighted to have you do that. And at the bottom here is a little chef inviting you to join Mastering the Art of Yoga Sequencing, or sometimes you'll see me write it as triple M, MMM, because it's delicious. It is one half of my 300-hour yoga teacher training. It is a 6-month mentorship program where we go deep on several ways that you can level up your teaching. And one of the 5 modules in the 6-month curriculum there is on theming. And what you'll see in the MMM space, is a full beverage cart with not only the themes from the books, but some other ones. And every month I write a lesson plan for the group. We practice it together, we workshop it together, we adapt it for our own students, and I also suggest some themes that would pair. That's why I call them the beverage cart, because they're recipes that are the meals. That's the movement, the sequencing part of the class, and then there's the theme. Just like having tea with your scones elevates eating a scone, having the right beverage to pair with your meal is a way to elevate it. And that is my slide. So I'm going to click off of them. Whoa, and then I need to stop screen sharing so that you do not get overwhelmed. Boom. And I am back. If anybody has any questions, I am happy to see them in the Q&A. Otherwise, I'm going to sip some water for a moment, and then I'll sign us off. Livy, your husband has been coming to class. Yeah, it is so important to have a family member come to class because they're going to give you super different feedback than your students are. And it may be too honest in the feedback sometimes than your students would do. He said he doesn't like to hear a long explanation. He just wants to move, but he also likes to have something to think about as he moves through the practice. Sometimes the theme lands and sometimes it doesn't, says Livy. Yes, exactly. And I think your husband is expressing what probably the majority of our students are thinking, that they don't want to have a huge lecture at the beginning, especially if you start them sitting and they've already been sitting all day and it doesn't feel especially comfortable to be sitting. So getting them moving sooner than later is always a good idea. Or starting them on their backs if you do have a little something to say, or on their sides or on their bellies, anywhere but sitting can be really accessible for people. But yes, we want to introduce this theme, put a stitch at the beginning that you then can carry through. I love that you're getting that feedback from him. My older daughter came to my class for many years, and I always got the most interesting feedback from her. Janelle, great question. What are some ways to teach a class about the niyama of saucha? Saucha, we hear like purity, cleanliness. Those are the terms you use here, Janelle. I like to think of saucha as orderliness, and sometimes I will refer to it in terms of alignment. And that doesn't mean like you got to keep your knee over your ankle in a lunge. I mean, like, just like thinking like, why am I doing it this way? How could I clean this up a little bit? How could I have some clarity of purpose? How could I have some cleanness of movement? Like, where could I refine this a little bit more? How could I polish this a little bit more? And I think that's a good way to talk about saucha. I've also seen it like in classes with a lot of props as a way to remind people, don't just like throw your blocks all around the room. Like, everybody put your block at the top right corner of your mat. This is coming back to this concept of saucha, of cleanliness, of purity. Those are a few ideas. If anybody else has ideas about saucha, feel free to drop them in the chat. I see Susan is typing. Susan says, I get a bit too heady because I try to have a theme, match it with poses and a playlist, and it does take me hours. Appreciate how you help us simplify the themes, yet how to best match the physical and the playlist. I am not the best person to speak on this because I do not use music, and I have not for years. However, I used to. I cared so much. I cared so much about music. At that time, I was also teaching spinning, indoor cycling, which it was all about the music in there. So I thought, oh, yoga needs to do the same. And then I wound up taking yoga to athletes so much that it was not feasible for me to carry a speaker with me and be choosing my own music. And also, I would always forget to turn it off shuffle or put it in airplane mode, and somebody would call me. It was just a mess. So I abandoned music a while ago. That said, 100% music will elevate your theme if you do it well. And it is going to take a little bit of time to plan a class like that. So here's where you can buy back your time, is teach that class again, and then teach it again and teach it again. And I really think your students would love to see it over the course of 4 weeks or longer in a row. Maybe you change a song or two, but it's got the same general. Some of them are not going to notice that it's the same class, that it's the same lesson plan, and then others will, and they're going to be happy about it. They're not going to protest. They're not going to think that you're just phoning it in. They are going to be grateful that you gave them some consistency, that they get to experience something a second time. So while it does take more time to write a theme and it does take more time to write a playlist, if you can then repurpose it over the course of several weeks or even a couple months, all the better. Now, if you're like, Sage, I can't do that. I just can't. My brain won't take it. Okay, document what you put together. Give it a really clear title. Maybe you use Google Sheets or, again, Notion database. Notion is the software I used to build you these slides today. And you could track your pair of theme and playlist and even what your sequence is, and then you can recycle it over the course of the year. So maybe you don't do it 4 weeks in a row, but you definitely do it once a quarter. And every 12 weeks, every 16 weeks, this same class comes around again. I think that's a really good way to buy back some of your time that you've already invested. Get a return on the investment of your time in planning. Erica, this is great. Erica says she's such a recently and focused on what we take into our minds. That is so fantastic. I absolutely love it. My students have been stressed about the news, yeah, and social media, and I asked them to consider how to stay informed, but to take breaks to take in things that will enrich their minds and spirits. That is beautiful, Erica. You said that so much better than I could have. And Janelle, there's your answer. That's just fantastic. Awesome. All right, if anybody has anything else to say, I'll keep my eye on the chat for just another minute or two. Let me preview where we are going next. For those of you who are in the prep station, our monthly snack and chat call is a week from Saturday. And if you have any friends who are interested in 200-hour yoga teacher training, where you've got your eye on a certain student who you know would be a fantastic teacher, point them my way because I am leading a 200-hour yoga teacher training. Applications open in May. The curriculum opens in June, and we are meeting live online. It's all fully online from basically Labor Day to Thanksgiving. So from September to November. The curriculum will be done in November. Folks will graduate and have the certificate in November, but then they're going to move into the prep station for 6 more months of support. So all told, it's a year-long program with me. It is a 200-hour yoga teacher training. Tell your friends. I'm doing a live call open house for that on next Saturday, the 18th at noon, and then another one in May. And our next comfort zone conversation, our next call in this model comes on the third Thursday in May. It is on balance, which is one of my most favorite topics. When I polled the group and asked what y'all would be interested in, balance ranked very high just after theming. So balance is something, it's a universal. It is a fantastic thing to be able to teach no matter whom you teach, no matter who your student population is. If they are aging, aren't we all? If they are young and floppy and need to grow aware of where their bodies are in space, if they are desk workers, balance applies there too, because balance doesn't just mean balancing on one leg in tree pose or dancer pose. It can, but it can also mean finding the right balance between sthira and sukha, between effort and ease, between tapas and ishvara pranidhana, between work and rest. And that is a message that goes for everyone. So RSVP, join me on the live call on that third Thursday in May, and I will have the replay available for folks there too. Erica, you got a lot of hearts on that. That was really, really good. Fantastic. Well, my wish for y'all is that you do not overthink it, that you just try this. Try putting 4 stitches into your very next class and come back into comfort zone and let me know how it goes. Anytime you have a question, anytime you want to share something, you can pop a question in the Ask a Question space at Comfort Zone, or you can visit the space called Cookie Swap, Share a Tip. That's kind of our wins and bragging space where you can say like, I did this theme, like Erica, honey, write up this Saucha theme for us and pop it in there under Cookie Swap. You're going to get a lot of love for that. People would be very excited to see that. That's the place where we can share some sweet stuff that we either have offered to our students or that we benefited from seeing and hearing as we take other people's classes. And that's absolutely fine. Yes, Lily, exactly. Awesome. Lily says, I love the ideas of how to weave the theme through the class. I was initially taught the theme was supposed to guide a student for an intention, but yeah, let the student take it however they will. We can trust our students to make smart choices for themselves. We don't need to decide everything for them. And just like we wouldn't micromanage their alignment in their physical bodies, we don't need to micromanage their alignment in their spiritual and psycho-emotional bodies either. They get to make their own decisions. Good. Awesome, Erica. I'm so glad. Well, thanks, y'all. I was a little worried. I was like, this isn't going to be a full hour, but look at me. I can monologue with the best of them. And I will really look forward to seeing y'all on a call in the future.